Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I am very excited to have Wade Lightheart on with us today to talk about the 5 stages of digestion. He's had an incredibly interesting life devoted to health and fitness since the age of 15 when his sister was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He's gone on to really everything from studying in ashrams to competing in bodybuilding. Mr. Universe, is that right?
Yep.
As a vegetarian. I don't get through the week without meat. I don't know how you did that. I think it's amazing. I can't wait to hear more about what you have to share regarding digestion. Yeah, so please.
Yeah. Well, great to be here. Thank you. And, there's, as biohackers, I think the number one premise is to experiment and that means you're going to have a lot of failed experiments. But you live and you learn and you start to develop an intuitive nature, particularly if you start to take your observational component along with data and correlate the two. And I think we've in the kick on science, I feel, is that everything is done in these double-blind, peer-reviewed studies, which don't necessarily translate very well in the real world, and it doesn't designate for bio-individuality within the experiment. So therefore, what is the real value of that data if you're trying to optimize? And I don't think anybody wants to be part of the general public if they're listening to this podcast. So as a bodybuilder, I was a former, I think we were the originators of biohacking. We're always into this kind of thing, or at least in the modern world. And I've been running a lot of experiments for a long time, and it's been a great adventure.
So you mentioned some of the failed experiments. Can you share one of those? I'd like to share one after you're done, because I think it's important that people know, sometimes the road to finding what works involves lots of screwing up.
Yes, well, I'll share one of my most recent ones, I think.
Hmm.
And that was, so I was engaging in alternate day fasting, which I think is, I want to have a caveat there. I think it's really, really powerful in a short period of time. Dropped about 22 pounds in a little bit under about 12 weeks. Actually, I probably did most of that within 8 weeks, and it kind of tapered off to maybe like 2 or 3 in the last. And I kind of had this intuitive feeling at 8 weeks that I was starting to go into kind of like a metabolic catabolic slowdown. I was out walking in the desert of Sedona, is getting supercharged on sunlight for 2 or 3 hours a day. And I noticed that I didn't want to walk as much as I was before. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're probably getting a slowdown here. But I pushed through it. And then when I came out of it, though, I rebound up about 14, 15 pounds, like within a few weeks coming out of it. And then I had to stabilize, and now I'm starting to taper back down. So I probably shouldn't have extended the fast that long, probably a month, like do 4 weeks and then cater back to like maybe 2 weeks of regulation and then maybe another 4 weeks and 2 weeks. And as you get leaner and leaner, that window of spikes is going to have to become more frequent. So that's a failed experience. It's not an entirely failed, and that's the
Uh-huh.
important thing. As I learned something, I pushed past what was valuable, came back, and now we're tapering back down. And then I'm going to do it. I'm going to run another experiment in September, I think, on that program and do what I just suggested. So yeah, that's a recent one.
Well, I think that's really comes down to the heart of it, though, is that when it comes to optimizing digestion, which is really optimizing metabolism for the body, we're always kind of working with emptying and filling, right? And getting that balance, getting that sweet spot. So sometimes you may, again, my experience, I've tried to take lots of maybe nourishing supplements, but then you get a bit of a traffic jam going on. The cellular uptake gets slow. And then other times you might try purging and really fasting and cleaning out the body. And then the mitochondria get lazy because they're just not well nourished. And that's just, yeah, I think that's really the essence of it, because that's what's going to be regulating inflammation in every other system in the body. So it's such an important topic you're covering today, the stages of digestion, because really that's the balancing act we're all engaging in.
You nailed it, because for everyone needs to recognize something, that it's a single canal from your mouth to your butt. And So when food, you chew it up, you think it's in your body. It's not. It's in this tube, and that tube has a series of very specific biochemical processes that must transpire in order for you to digest, absorb, and utilize the food as either building blocks or energy units.
Mhm.
That's really digestion is. And unfortunately, the unintended consequences of technological innovations, monoculture farming, the use of fertilizers on the soil, and then came herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides, and then came genetic modification, and then came preservatives and dyes. And all of those agents of the modern food production and distribution, which allowed us to distribute more calories and more food. So we solved the problem of not having enough calories, which starvation is a big factor throughout
Mhm.
history of humans. But we didn't really understand what quality of food is, what the microbiome was involved with, what is the enzymatic component of food, and why those things are important. And then on top of that, you add all the electromagnetic radiation and chemicalization and all these stuff. We have all of these stressors that our ancestors didn't have. And I believe that it's our moral and ethical duty to generations to come to figure out how to operate these human organisms in today's reality as it is, because it's been different than evolutionary biology for billions of years. We're in a major, major shift with the species. And so digestion is the most important area of making sure that whatever supplement or whatever diet that you're able to break that down. And there's 5 specific stages to that process.
Excellent. It makes so much sense. There are, in the realm of Chinese medicine, there are formulas that were very popular during times of starvation that are very nourishing. And right now we just have these additional obstacles that we didn't have before.
100%. And so I think that's where a lot of people kind of make the mistake. They say, oh, well, just do natural food or just do this type of diet. And oftentimes dietary selection that a person's doing is actually because that digestive system is compromised. And this particular diet is going to work well because the systems that are involved in digesting and absorbing that are less compromised. And so really, I think the human species has a much bigger range of digestive possibilities if it's in a state of health. If
Mm.
it's not, then you're in trouble. And I think that's what leads to dietary tribes and these type of mentalities. But they're missing the big picture, and that is getting your digestion optimized in a way that allows you to absorb and manufacture the energy that you want.
And be resilient too, because I don't know how many people you've seen this way. I'm sure it's a lot where they're just in this increasingly small bubble of incapacity where I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that. And it's often people who are maybe leaders in health who are just talking about what they can't do. And it's like, you know, I know a guy who just pumps gas for a living who can, who can eat a chili cheeseburger and not die. Maybe I should be following that guy instead.
You make up a great point. And years ago, I went through a major digestive crash after I went to the Mr. Universe contest. I was trying to apply meat eating mentality to a vegetarian plant-based diet, and this was in 2003, so it was a long
Mhm.
time ago. Nobody said that could be done. It wasn't possible. You can't compete at the Mr. Universe without drugs and without protein meats and all that stuff. And I said, no, well, let's see if that's true. Let's go do an experiment, see if it is. And I was able to do it, but I made some mistakes and messed up my digestion. After the universe, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. So that was
Oh, wow. Okay.
so I was able to determine the difference between, there's 3 type of things that attract people in the health industry: aesthetics, performance, and health.
Mhm.
Usually we get attracted because we want to look better for our chosen sexual partners. So aesthetics.
Mhm.
Then as we move into kind of what we do nowadays, you're in your career, you're running your life and your family, you're not so concerned about his aesthetics as you are about performance. How do I get the most out of myself under the environment? But then ultimately it comes down to, well, you start playing the what can I do period, and how do I do this for as long as possible. You start playing the health game.
Mhm.
And so those 3 angles of the triangles are the way that we look at things. And so what I had discovered is I was on a performance-based diet, which was to produce an extreme, physical condition of super low body fat levels and hypermuscularity, which is not conducive necessarily for long-term health, but it was conducive to the parameters I set.
Hmm.
In doing that, I lost my health. And from that, I had to rebuild my health and add another element, because I just assumed if I was fit and I was lean and I could perform this amount of exercise and I had great cardio, well, I must be healthy. And that was an early on mistake that most people find out soon enough if they're in athletic performance or they're doing that. So you're going to find that one out sooner or later.
Fair enough. So what is the first stage of digestion?
Yeah, it's the taste, touch, smell of food. So if I say dill pickles and sauerkraut, most people start to
Hmm. Yeah,
salivate.
it's changing already.
And that is a salivary response where your body starts to sense the food. And I find it very interesting that most of the most popular types of food are finger foods:
Mm.
burgers, fries, pizza, chips,
Hmm.
things that you actually touch. And of course, in Ayurvedic philosophy, that was an aspect of tasting, touching, sensing, and eating with your hands.
Mm.
And when the food goes in that mouth, and that first stage is chewing the food up and as you know, the fancy name's masticating it,
Hmm.
that is breaking the food up into it and preparing your body to recognize, okay, it's time to relax, it's time to feed. And you
Hmm.
switch out of fight or flight and into rest and relax a modality in your nervous system. Now, the food then travels down the esophagus and into the what's called the upper cardiac portion of the stomach. So this upper cardiac portion of the stomach it'll stay there for anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. Now, at this stage, hydrochloric acid hasn't entered the picture. The enzymes present in the food are now going to become activated because of the warm, hot environment. So, and that's what's supposed to happen. But unfortunately, humans are the only species on the planet that cooks their food. So because we cook all the food, we cook all the enzymes out of it, and we cook all the microbes out of it. Now, that's great for maybe parasitic stuff or keeping stuff, and we irradiate it or we pasteurize it, and we do all these things that take these elements out of the food that we didn't know were important. And so our definition of food doesn't include microbes. It doesn't include enzymes as part of the nutritional panel, and therefore, as a species, we're completely devoid of those elements in our food, which we'd normally get if we were eating, quote unquote, a natural diet. So that what happens after that is hydrochloric acid will then come into the stomach and begin to work with the food chyme. And that whole package will now the pH will start to drop. So if it's slightly alkaline or slightly acidic, which most meals are in that range, right around 7 and maybe a little lower, a little higher, it'll start to drop the pH. And there's two purposes for that. One purpose is that it will activate some enzymes and deactivate other enzymes at the various pH ranges. So, for example, with proteins, they get cleaved at different amino acids cleave off at different pH levels. There's different sizes and et cetera, et cetera. The second component of the pH, and maybe the most important part, is that it serves as a disinfectant for invaders, parasites, viruses, bacteria, any kind of pathogenic organism that may have gotten in there alive needs to be killed, bugs, whatever. And that hydrochloric acid does a really great job. It's really hard. Your stomach acid it's more acidic than battery acid. And the stomach lining is designed to withstand those environments and create that. So it's a big part of our immune system. Once that's complete, your body will release what's called alkaline minerals as the food chyme exits out of the stomach and into the intestinal tract. Now, in the intestinal tract, you have hundreds of different types of microbes called bacteria or friendly flora. You'll hear these things called the microbiome or probiotics. I always say that there's, we have the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's about 10% good, 10% bad, and 80% opportunists based on your diet, location, stress, all these other factors. And they're going to become more active or less active based on those components. That's why people get sick oftentimes when they move to a different climate, or they, go on a vacation and they're exposed to different types of bacteria or different types of food. it's not that it's more than maybe where you are now, it's just a different type. And now that starts changing your microbiome, which is dynamically changing all the time. It's
Mm.
at this stage that that food is now converted. It's the final stage of digestive conversion, where they convert what's left of the food into the energy blocks or the building blocks for the body. And that's done through a layer called the biofilm. And a lot of people have damaged biofilm, and this is where they get leaky gut, gas, bloating, all that sort of stuff, or a dysbiosis in the types of bacteria because maybe they took a lot of antibiotics, maybe they went through a stressful period,
Mhm.
maybe they were choosing a diet that wasn't right for them, didn't have enough fiber, they were starving out. There's all these different reasons that can upset that. And then the final stage is elimination. This is where the peristaltic contractions, which have been moving the food all the way through, then contract and you eliminate the waste. So the problems come in for people, and these are the kind of the points to note for people. Generally, if they're having skin issues, concentration issues, energy issues, or just feeling like food is sitting in their stomach, usually there's not a sufficient amount of enzymes. If they're getting acid reflux, heartburn, those type of things, or they get kind of a gray tone to their skin, this is often indicative that they don't have enough hydrochloric acid being produced by the body.
Mm.
And that happens for enzymes and hydrochloric acid. By the time you're 40 years old, you're producing about 30% of what your body naturally produced. And then in the final stage, if you're getting a lot of bloating, in the intestinal tract, difficulty catching a lot of colds, maybe having yeast infections, or that can also show up as skin conditions. Generally, there's a problem with the bacteria inside the body. The microbiome is often. So you can now do tests on these areas and find out, what area of digestion you might need to optimize.
Excellent. So it seems like, really, aside from chewing and getting acquainted with your food, that first step with the enzymes that have been missing because we're cooking our food, that seems to be really important. Now, I'm a big fan of the products you developed, in particular the Zymes. I find that my personal experience has been, if I'm just being lazy and I have a bunch of those, then I start to feel energized in my muscles as though I've exercised a couple days before and I just kind of want to get going. So I find that very impressive. A question that I've had based on those is, as you mentioned, some enzymes are being destroyed, some enzymes are being activated. Um, when it comes to enzyme mixes, and I've tried others in the past, what are the mistakes people are making that are rendering those inert or unusable?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, enzymes come in multiple different classes. There's food enzymes,
Hmm.
there's animal-based enzymes, there's plant-based enzymes, there's systemic enzymes, and then there's cultured enzymes.
Mm.
And so food enzymes would be something that you find in any food, any living organism. The difference between stones, plants, and people is the enzymatic capacity. You have 25,000 different enzymes and chemical processes that they know of at this point that require various types of enzymes, like so 25,000, but they fall into families of enzymes. So we're going to talk about the types first, and then I'm going to get into the specifics. Then we have, like, for example, a lot of enzymes will take enzymes out of plant extracts. And those plant extracts will have a certain potency and effectiveness within a pH range. I do believe that most plant-based enzymes are generally superior to animal-based enzymes because they typically have a wider range of pH where they will work. Then there's animal-based enzymes. Now, there are some situations where people have been benefited from taking specific types of animal-based enzymes for specific reasons, usually under the guidance of a naturopathic doctor or something like that. There might be some specific genetic precursor that allows them to have. Those would be on the potency scale, somewhat around just a, bromelain or papain that you would find. Then you kind of move to systemic enzymes, are enzymes that are used not in digestion, that you take and absorb, not when you're eating food, that are used for maybe reducing plaque in the body, uh, you know, or help healing and various areas of that. And then you get into what's called cultured enzymes. And a cultured enzyme is an enzyme that has been developed and grown on specific mediums that allow you to get anywhere between 10 to 100 times more potency. And that's because they control the environment that they're made on. They add certain elements into the growing cultures. And cultured enzyme is going to be much more expensive, but it's going to be much more effective than something that you would find. And so what happens is people don't have the ability to designate, because that's not part of the nutritional fact labels, to determine a protease from a plant-based, an animal-based, or a cultured enzyme. And that cultured enzyme is going to give you 10 to 100x more effective than either a straight plant, or a straight animal-based enzyme. The other area where people run into trouble is they don't have sufficient amount of the enzyme present to address the issue that's causing them the problem. The most common problem is proteolytic digestion. In other words, the ability to break down your proteins. Undigested proteins are the biggest inflammatory agents inside the body. So anytime your food is not broken down and digested, it becomes a potential contaminant, can mess you up. And so the problem with proteases is going through that pH lane. That's a really critical aspect of breaking down protein in that almost at the front stage of digestion. I actually call it pre-digestion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a pH, the enzymes like at 3.0, 4.5, and 6.0, and those have a variance on either side of that, like a bell curve of capabilities, you're not going to be able to completely break down your protein. So when that protein gets into the intestinal tract, the bacteria are not going to be able to convert that into the building blocks. And now it becomes a potential feed for bad bacteria. The bad bacteria will create indole and scadol and all these sort of things. So that's one area on the proteolytic side. Proteases break down protein. Maybe if they have a high carbohydrate diet, they don't have sufficient amount of amylase or potentially cellulase if they have a plant-based. So like things like hemicellulase and phytase are very important in breaking down plant matter. And then you have lipase, which is breaking down fats. And there's other derivatives of these type of enzymes, but those three, amylase, protease, and lipase, are they're kind of like the big three. And in Masszymes, what we did is we actually built 17 different types of enzymes, all cultured, put together, and then we added an extract of astragalus root, which is a patented called astrogen and astrozyme, and the astrozyme enhances the enzymatic ability by anywhere from 30 to 60%. And I did this because of what happened to me in the Mr. Universe contest. I was eating, at the time, I was eating all this protein, but I wasn't breaking down the protein, and that's what set me up into digestive tract. I felt terrible. I had pains. I had brain fog. I had all these type of things. And so we built a product to fix my own problems.
Uh-huh.
And we did. And then we said, well, here's what I did. And we started sharing it. Matt and I coached 15,000 people over the next 4 years through our bodybuilding site at the time. And I had a little holistic health clinic, and I had all these people coming in with digestive issues. And I said, well, here, try this. And it started fixing. And then we got into it. And all of a sudden we realized, hey, this actually works for real people.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2007, I made a comeback and was able to go to the world championships again, eating only 85 grams of protein, but a day.
Wow.
But my key was that I was breaking down and absorbing and utilizing that entire 85 grams as I was preparing for that contest. And then I knew, I was like, okay, now we can tell the world about this.
Just burning clean. Well, there is for the approach you're taking, there's a lot of historic precedents. When the Chinese moved from a plant-based diet to a pastoral diet, when the Mongols took over about 1,000 years ago, all kinds of digestive problems. And there was a family of herbal formulas that were plant-based and fermented that were helping a great deal. And then one of the main doctors at that time started a formula, and its central herb was the same herb that you're using the extract of. He actually combined that with ginseng, and then so that's the whole thought process, that these they're considered heavenly doctors of the Yuan dynasty about 1,000 years ago, and they're using the exact same process that you guys have been. So
well, it's interesting that you share that, because in Asia, in Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine has a rich history in understanding these potential activators. They would notice that certain herbs make all the rest of the things work. They knew that culturing and fermenting foods, you could add different elements and get better foods. And yeah, they were way ahead what we are in North America. And actually,
Hmm.
almost all cultures have developed some sort of fermentation process in order to accelerate digestibility of the food.
It's really interesting using the plant-based extract of astragalus with that. Um, It's something that I like to do is I'll add the masszymes because one of the biggest differences between a very expensive high quality herb and one that isn't is actually the enzymatic content. So really adding that in there, you get this kind of supercharging effect to where you don't need the high dose, just like you don't need the high amount of proteins that you did before, because you're just able to utilize it so efficiently. And I just find that really beautiful. Um, to be perfectly honest, there's not a lot that I see in the supplement world that I really light up about. But I think that the approach you guys are taking is not only brilliant, but it really follows with, I wouldn't say it's ideal for everybody in all corners. Like, some lady in the jungle in Vietnam, maybe she doesn't need it. But for those of us with a pastoral diet in our modern situation, I consider it really indispensable.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And we have what we call the Formula One philosophy, and we don't build products on margin. We build it on our mission.
Hmm.
And you need something. There's nothing more expensive than a product that doesn't work.
Hmm.
And so our philosophy is we're going to build a product that works, and it's going to be best in class or first in class if it's a new product.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we don't do it. And if it's something that's already out there in the market, I would rather just refer people to say, hey, you know what, those guys make a great this whatever, and I respect that, and I really like the people who spend the time, the energy, and the years in it. And Masszymes is now in its third generation, so we're always looking to improve the product, and we continue to do that with all our products. We keep updating it, upgrading it, making it better, making it better, making it better, because you can
Hmm.
never get to perfection, but you always want to try.
I can attest to that because Matt was asking me to look into sourcing for some herbal formulas for potentially mixing with enzymes. And I gave him quality options. I was like, okay, here's the general quality, C grade that everybody uses. It works fair enough. Here's the mid grade, and then here's the highest. He was just without a beat, just definitely the highest. We're only interested in working with that absolute highest quality that's possible. So I think it's not not common that you see that. I've worked in the natural health industry before, talked with companies, and um, they really didn't care if it worked or not. Their idea was, it'll be on the shelf in GNC for a few months, and then it'll go to the bargain bin, and there will be something else. So as long as the margins are high, who cares? We'll just dump the rest into marketing. That was actually a huge impasse that I've had. But now that those bottleneck company types are really out of the way, people are, I think, finding out more about this by word of mouth or through micro media.
Well, shows like this, and what I think was really changed the game, and what we've noticed for our own company as well, because we, you know, trundled along and we had our cult like following that, knew about us. But with the explosion of the internet, we now have the ability to access people like yourself that are able to provide the discernment capabilities for the end consumer.
Mm.
Someone that's invested the time, the energy to really know something, experiment with a lot of products, a lot of services, or whatever it happens to be, and say, hey, you know what, here's my experience, here's what I've been able to do, and this is why I like these brands or this product or this service. And that's the beauty of digital media that's happening today. Yeah, there's a lot of fluff out there, but there's also, at any given time, we can access the greatest minds throughout history in the click of a button. And I think if you know how to curate it and you find those people that you trust, then it's our responsibility as advocates to ensure that that trust is built,
Hmm.
and it's our job as media people to extend that out there so that we can fight off, which I think is a massive health crisis that is transpiring globally. And my thoughts are, I don't think that we're going to lose a lot of people in the next coming while. And the evidence is certainly suggesting that our quality of life is going downhill as far as a health perspective, except this group of biohackers, which health is going up because they're leveraging information and technology to kind of go to the next level, which is really fun.
Awesome. So, how can people find out more about your work and get in touch with your products?
Yeah, so anybody can just kind of, find us at Bioptimizer. In fact, if you go to bioptimizers.com, botanical biohacking, you will receive a discount on any product you want. But also, I have an 84 steps program, which I kind of collapsed all of the things I've learned over 30 years into a simple 12-week, 5 to 15 minute video at a time. And you can jump around and understand the theory of how we apply nutrition. What are some of the components? Where did I get this information? And put it all into one so people can, while they're, taking their kids out to gymnastics or, to martial arts or whatever, they can sit there and watch a video and learn something or listen to it in a podcast. And then, of course, all the Instagram handles and all that sort of stuff is all at bioptimizers.com. You can find all that stuff.
Awesome. I One last question. How do you apply this when you're, uh, say, doing brain training and really working for neural optimization? Because the gut brain axis, that's a whole branch. And so, how are you approaching kind of psychology and neural optimization?
Wow, funny you should just ask. I just got back from another session of 40 years of Zen,
Uh huh.
and
We're just up there.
so it's my fourth trip around in the neurofeedback, and I haven't found anything that gives more of an ROI as far as form and function.
Hmm.
So you can, and what I find with people, we would take people, and if they've got the budget to do so, is to do a 90-day what I would call regenerative process. When I got into my trouble, we went 90 days under the guidance of a medical doctor, and I've
Hmm.
optimized that program since that time. That was in 2004, 2003, 2004. So I would say that they need to spend the time to clean out their entire gut and use enzymes on an empty stomach. Take 5 enzymes before your workout. Take 5 enzymes before your deep concentration components. And it's remarkable how quickly that will add a level of clarity, function, and I would say resilience. In other words, you're able to maintain a peak energy state a lot longer without using food, because sometimes food is disruptive because you want all the blood flow and you want enzymatic capacity and you want everything working, and enzymes unlock virtually every chemical process, including cognition. And most people who do 30 days say, my body feels better. After 60 days, they're like, I have more energy and I'm sleeping different. And under 90 days, they go, I can't believe how much clarity I have in my life. And generally they start making a lot different decisions in their day-to-day life, and
Hmm.
that's pretty powerful. So there's an old saying: if you want a better life, make better decisions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really looked forward to talking with you. Just bumped into you briefly in Seattle last time, but I'm really thankful you took the time to come on the show and share with the audience.
Well, thank you so much. You're really great to be here, and anytime, it's my pleasure. So